From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to this special edition of U.S. Farm Report. We're on the road this week, this time from the Agriculture Future of America, or AFA, conference in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what we have in store. A permanent fix or a temporary solution. An ag guest worker bill floating around Washington is drawing mixed emotions from the field. It's an income problem in farm country, but what could a rising debt-to-income ratio mean for farmland?
What's key now is what lenders and farmers do going forward.
As the race to the college football championship turns up,
fight, 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 fight.
The memory of one icon lives on. That's American countryside. And in John's world,
is this a good time to quit?
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Now for the market-related news. As beef exports remain on a fast track, Japan's tariff on frozen beef not dampening overall exports to the country. New numbers show chilled beef shipments in September climbed 31.5% over last year. That's after the country hit the U.S. with lofty tariffs on frozen beef imports on August 1st. The tariffs went from 38.5% to 50% on frozen beef. That remains in effect through March 31st. And as the U.S. tries to break through the Chinese beef market, China announcing this week it's lifting suspension of red meat imports from Australia. That ban in place for 6 years. Well, foot and mouth disease found on a pig farm in China. According to Reuters, China's Ministry of Agriculture reported the case on a pig breeding farm. The O-type strain found in 30 pigs. China is not only the world's top producer of pork, but also the top consumer. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump making his first official visit to Asia this weekend. His stops include South Korea, China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. The main focus is creating a united front against North Korea. But after the president withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, trade is expected to also be a topic during his trip, especially as the president visits some of the world's largest economies. Changes to the Renewable Fuel Standard rule is now in the hands of the Office of Budget Management. The deadline for EPA to issue its final rule is November 30th. EPA left 2018 ethanol volumes unchanged at 15 billion gallons. That's the maximum set by law. Biodiesel set at 2.1 billion gallons. That's after the head of the EPA abandoned plans to cut levels of the RFS after a group of Midwest senators spoke out against such changes.
Agriculture's national forecast is brought to you by Ilevo seed treatment from Bayer.
All right, those are the headlines. Now let's pitch it back to the studio where meteorologist Mike Hoffman is standing by. Mike, it felt a lot more like winter than fall to many of our viewers this week.
Tyne, that's absolutely right, and it'll be the case again this week, especially in the northern tier of states. Let's check the drought monitor. Still fairly dry, South Dakota into Montana, with some areas extreme to exceptional droughts. That's a lot better than it was. It's been getting drier in Missouri and Arkansas, but boy, did the drought conditions go away in the northeast. They had been getting worse across the northern Mississippi Valley and the northeast a month ago, but as we've moved through the last 4 weeks, it's gotten better in both of those two places, but it continues to get drier in Arkansas and some of the surrounding areas. All right, let's go day by day. On Monday, then, we have a cold front moving through the Tennessee Valley through the northeast with some scattered showers, maybe even thunderstorms along it as well. This is colder air once again coming in. It's going to settle across the eastern half of the country, but only so far south because this is going to stall out as a front. Now, you will notice some decent snows across the interior portions of the west. Still fairly active out west as we start the week. By Wednesday, then, that first system diving through the southern Mississippi Valley with a few scattered showers and thunder showers. Stationary front to the east. Cold and dry across the northern tier of states. And then you can see the next system coming in out west. That one tracks farther north this time, which warms it up briefly in the east as we head through the end of the week. But there will be a little bit of rain and snow through the Great Lakes on Friday. Stationary front from Texas to Florida with a little activity. And stationary front through the northwest with snow to the northeast of it. Rain off to the southwest. We'll check your longer range forecast for the next 90 days coming up on our next half hour.
Thanks, Mike. Well, after the break, we're taking the show inside. We launch into our marketing discussion. Alan Brugler, Arlen Suderman, and Sterling Liddell join me next.
U.S. Farm Report on the road is brought to you by AFA. creating partnerships that identify, encourage, and support outstanding collegiate and young professional men and women pursuing careers in agriculture. To learn more, visit agfuture.org. And Rabo AgriFinance, committed to your growth today and for years to come. Visit your local office today or raboag.com.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Well, as I mentioned before the break, we're here at AFA. You know, and when I look at the future of agriculture and I look across the room, I'm not worried about the future of agriculture whatsoever, because we definitely have some bright individuals that are joining us this week for our taping and have a great marketing panel lined up. Arlen, let's jump right into things. When we look late this week, House rolled out their tax reform plan. At the same time, the president nominating a new chair for the Fed. When we look at all of this and the momentum with some of this fiscal policy, when does possibly this spill over into the commodity markets?
Yeah, I think we will start seeing it in weeks and months ahead. A lot of it depends on whether we see any roadblocks to getting it through. Republicans have had trouble agreeing on anything and actually passing anything. They did get a budget bill through pretty quickly. They seem to have learned their lessons. So if they can get it through in somewhat close to the similar form, then I do think it starts to benefit. We need to realize, though, that this is fiscal stimulus. And fiscal stimulus, with any type of meaning behind it, means that monetary stimulus needs to be pulled back. And that probably means a stronger dollar. And eventually that stronger dollar, even though the correlation, the historical correlation, which is inverse, has been weak this year, eventually I think that becomes a problem for the commodity sector. But for now, I think it's good. I think back to the elections, and we saw commodities and stocks and the dollar all rallying together. They can do that for a period of time. And I think we very well may see that if it looks like this is going to sail through.
Yeah, speaking of the dollar, I mean, when we talk about exports, it's all about that dollar. Yet, I mean, look at where we see meat exports and look at where we've seen kind of soy exports. It doesn't seem like the dollar has dampened our exports at this point.
Well, first thing you have to remember, of course, is we talk about the dollar as one entity, but it's really a basket of commodities or against different currencies, and you get different impacts versus the Japanese yen or the Brazilian real, et cetera. I think one of the things you want to look at here is that we have had this stimulus all around the world. Yeah. It wasn't just QE3 here. The Europeans have negative interest rates for a while. You basically got paid for having a mortgage in some cases. But the point is that commodity prices are relatively cheap in local currency terms, even with the recent rise in the dollar. So I think if the dollar comes back down, as Arlen was suggesting, that helps stimulate the exports. But for the most part, we've got equilibrium.
You know, Sterling, one thing the Fed watches is to make sure that the economy isn't overheating. You know, and we've seen some impressive, when we look at job growth and some of those other things, do you think that the economy is overheating, or do you think we're on some strong footing?
Well, before we see overheating, we really have to see inflation. And that really hasn't happened at this point. There's a lot of question, where's the inflation? Where is the movement of cash around the economy? And that hasn't happened yet. That's what the Fed is really watching before you see any kind of clamp down on any trying to slow the economy down. So at this point, we wouldn't be too concerned about overheating. We would just be concerned about what we're putting in place and what foundation we're building on for the future of this economy. The big question, I think, right now is how far can the Dow go before we see a major correction? Yeah, exactly. I mean, we continue to hit new highs. You don't think it could go any higher, and then it does the next day. But looking at a strong economy, you know, that's good for meat demand. And when we look at cattle prices, we've seen cattle prices on an impressive run. Pork prices have been impressive. You know, does this strong U.S. economy help support meat prices at this point?
Oh, it does, and a strong U.S. economy helps the global economy as well. And we did a study going country by country, and one of the things that we found was that the primary driver per capita meat consumption, of course, is income. And as we're seeing the growth of the global middle class, especially in China and East Asia, meat consumption goes up, but most countries, it's pork where we see the increase in per capita consumption along with poultry. And unfortunately, beef has a message to get out there. Beef tends to lag behind, tends to be hurt as income goes up because of perception it's not healthy. And so beef has a challenge before it in trying to expand its demand base.
Yeah, do you think this cattle climb that's been so impressive, do you think we've reached a top that we have a lot of downside risk ahead?
I think we're coming into a period of higher ready numbers. That is, the cattle finished ready for slaughter as we get into December and January. that's going to tend to put more beef in the cooler and more, require the consumer to eat more. And typically, yes, personal income is a big component of that, but per capita consumption is also driven by supply. And if you've got higher supply, you'll tend to have lower prices just to get that to move into the consumer's mouth.
All right, well, we need to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's switch over to some other commodities. Let's look at corn and beans. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more U.S. Farm Report in just a moment.
Unlock the power of ag technology this December in Indianapolis at the first ever Ag Tech Expo. Learn all about it at farmjournalagtech.com.
U.S. Farm Report on the Road is brought to you by AFA, creating partnerships that identify, encourage, and support outstanding collegiate and young professional men and women pursuing careers in agriculture. To learn more, visit agfuture.org. And Rabo AgriFinance, committed to your growth today and for years to come. Visit your local office today or raboag.com.
All right, back now from AFA with more U.S. Farm Report. Let's switch over to corn and beans. I mean, when we look at these stagnant prices, I read an article this week, and it was about preparing for a black swan. Really, we need kind of like a black swan event to happen to move corn prices higher. But what could one of those events be? I mean, it's so hard to prepare for something like that, Sterling.
Well, let's start off with the meat industry again, because that's the reason we're building this herd in the United States and also flock is because of these low prices. You can have low meat prices and low feed prices and still break even, and that's what's going on. So we're seeing some stagnation in demand, and that's really what is driving these prices down and not getting a lot of interest in investment. What would the black swan be? It would have to be drought, but the problem is, at this point, drought does not necessarily save us from low prices. It might be a stimulus for 1 year, but we have so many acres out there that are capable globally of coming into production that we can drive profits and movement out of the market pretty quickly.
When we look at this next November report, I've heard some analysts say possibly we see, big crops only get bigger, right? So when we look at the corn number, maybe USDA raises this corn yield again, raises production. That is not good news for corn prices. And so, if, drought we're looking at further out, but I mean, short term, what needs to happen to this market?
Well, I think the good news is our client survey this last week we released put the yield at 173.7 bushels per acre. Informa came out right after that, just above 173, I believe it was, and the market rallied. And what that tells me is similar to soybeans a month ago, is the market now seems to have a feel for what the size of the crop is, and the focus becomes on demand. Domestic demand is strong. Unfortunately, it tends to focus too much on the tail that wags the dog, and that's export demand. When we look at the corn picture, keep in mind that China, the price of corn has dropped in half over the past year. They are building a huge demand base. Now, they have a big supply, but once that supply gets whittled down, they've got this big demand base that's going to have to be filled. That's why they bought Syngenta to try to bump their yields up, and we're going to have a demand base to fill. Take outside of China, United States, the rest of the world's surplus supply is a 45-day supply. That's just 5 days larger than what it was when we had record prices a few years back. The world's comfortable with just-in-time supplies as long as that's not threatened.
At the same time, we've got to get this crop out of the field. And when we look at these harvest numbers, corn harvest 54% complete, 18 points, down 18 points from average. You look at Minnesota, 35 points behind, Iowa, 26 points behind. I mean, harvest is lagging. Does that have any play in this market at this point?
It's really not a market factor in corn because we had that 2.3 billion bushels left over from last year. We effectively had 25 or 30 bushels per acre already in the bin before we started the combines running. So it does have a local basis effect. It firms up the bids in areas where you've got a bunch of ethanol plants that aren't getting enough corn out of the field, for example. But in general, it's not a market factor because we had such a big cushion.
But on an average year, would it have been a market factor?
Oh yeah. If supplies were tighter, then we'd have seen a stronger performance in September, particularly as the market scrambled for those old crop bushels. But we had a cushion. Going back, if I could, for a second to the black swan theory, Brazil has been very late planting their soybeans. They've had some dryness down there. that could impact their second crop corn, the safrinha crop, because the beans aren't coming out of the field as early. And so we think that's a potential supportive factor.
Moving to demand, though, we were talking about demand on corn and beans. Do you think demand can pick up enough to provide support if we don't see an issue in South America, if we don't see some of those issues materialize?
Well, let's stay with South America a little bit. Brazil is in the process of enacting a new mandate for biodiesel, and that could potentially add 300 million bushel export to the United States in soybeans, where we're already seeing a pretty rapid export this year. That can be one thing that could happen this coming year. From a demand perspective, the swine herd is increasing. The poultry herd, maybe not as much, but the cattle herd is increasing, and the cattle herd has a lot of momentum behind it. So those are going to drive some demand. Really, we've got to look at China, though. China's going to be the big player in terms of these imports.
Yeah. All right. Well, we need to take a quick break, but we'll be back with closing thoughts when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
All right, time now for closing thoughts from Kansas City. We'll start with you, Arlen.
Global demand is strong for corn and soybeans. Supply has been big. We just finished the 2016-17 marketing year with 301 million bushels of soybeans in the United States. That's about 7.1% stocks to use, relatively tight. The United States, Argentina, and Brazil have increased production the last 3 years by 25%, and yet we're still not in a big surplus of beans. Demand is strong. Supply so far has been able to keep up.
All right, Alan.
I think it's going to take a little longer to get the corn market to really take off here. We've got limited farmer selling, but we've also got that large carryover from last year. We're looking for some improvement, though, as the funds shift from short back to a neutral position.
Okay. Sterling?
Despite what's happening with the dynamics, we need to be very conscious of the market and look for those opportunities to market grain into it. Usually aggressive marketing is rewarded in these types of environments.
All right. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Take a short break, and then John Phipps joins us next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Credenz soybean seed from Bayer, designed using smart genetics with tailored varieties to fit any field condition.
Well, it's tough times in agriculture when emotions run high, and that's definitely the case today. A recent story by John Phipps set off a range of emotions. The topic, quitting farming. Here's John Phipps.
Last month in Top Producer magazine, I wrote about quitting farming. My central point was I have witnessed the ends of many careers, and it seems to me that timing just matters. Just like marketing, there are good times to buy in and good times to sell out. While I was aiming for older farmers who can kind of see the finish line, the principle is the same for any producer. I heard back from some younger farmers who thought my words were too pessimistic. It can certainly seem that way, but unless you intend to die on the tractor, at some point you will quit farming. Just like estate planning, career planning is important. I should also point out that I am not telling people to quit or that this is the optimal moment, but suggesting that right now could be better than later. Choosing when is a paradox. The best time to get out is when things are going well, not when your business is in trouble or when farming is going through a truly difficult downturn. The best I can suggest is like that old marketing adage, sell when you can, not when you have to. Oddly enough, for younger farmers or for those looking to expand, this advice has another impact. Because our land base is fixed, there are only X number of acres, opportunities to grow your operation usually arise when another farmer exits. Even if you think I'm dead wrong about quitting right now, you could benefit from those who think otherwise. To be sure, I see plenty of economic risks ahead, and we have and will continue to talk about them here. The biggest may be an unwillingness we have as a profession to consider ending our careers before they unravel completely. However, there is no law or tradition that prohibits finishing our work when we can do so profitably and efficiently. Read the article yourself, and like many other farmers have, let me know if you think this is a good time to quit.
Thanks, John. I definitely suggest reading his article. You can find it on agweb.com. USFarmReport.com will also post it on the U.S. Farm Report page. Well, when we come back, it's a dire situation with producers on the West Coast desperate for ag labor. We have the story next.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome back to the special edition of U.S. Farm Report. We're on the road from Kansas City, and we have much more ahead. It's an income issue in farm country, and now USDA comparing one major stat to the 1980s. As debate over farm workers heats up, growers on the West Coast are desperate for help. Andrew McRae remembers one of NCAA football's finest, whose coined phrase lives on. And in customer support, advice for smaller farmers. Now for the headlines. As the income problem in farm country worsens, the USDA now comparing the debt-to-income ratio to the 1980s. USDA releasing its income expectations for 2017. While net farm income is forecast to improve slightly this year, debt is weighing on the balance sheet. The debt-to-income ratio is expected to be at its highest point since 1985, forecast at 6 to 1. Land experts say anything above 4 to 1 can be dangerous for major parts of the farm economy, especially land prices, adding that if the ratio stays above 6.1 for several years, a major collapse in land values could be ahead, including a correction of farmland values dropping by 50 or 60%.
What's key now is what lenders and farmers do going forward. Are they going to lay on another layer of debt in order to maintain cash flow and spending? Are they going to continue to handle debt wisely, which has been the case so far? And that's why we're not facing the situation that we saw in the 80s, where we had the balance sheets just going into the dumper, and then we had the foreclosure on farms. This is an income problem, and as long as we don't turn it into a balance sheet problem and a net worth problem, we'll slide through this thing. It'll probably take another 1 to 2 years, in my mind.
Meanwhile, farmers remain the top buyers of farmland, and a couple recent sales in Iowa show farmland prices could be on the rise. A recent sale in Plymouth County, and that sale divided into 2 tracts. 40 acres cashed in at $15,200 per acre. The remaining 157 acres drew $13,600 an acre. And then another auction in O'Brien County brought $13,400 an acre. The 160 acres was offered in 2 different tracts, but a local farmer bought both. Jim Rodermick says it's a seller's market right now.
The past couple of months, through the summer, we have had very little supply to sell, and the demand is still there.
Now he says while farmers are still the top buyer of land, investor buyers are becoming very active in land auctions. That's helping push prices higher. Well, as landowners' hopes of eliminating the death tax becomes closer to reality, the House rolling out its tax reform bill in Washington this week. The bill is called Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The House's plan doubles the estate tax exemptions initially, then fully repealing the tax after 6 years. It also reduces the number of individual tax brackets, and the bill doubles the standard deduction for both individuals and married couples. Now, the corporate tax part of the bill, it would be lowered from 35% to 20%. NOG is officially announcing the resignation of former NOG president and Sharon Springs, Kansas farmer David Shim. Shim resigning his position to pursue other opportunities in his home state of Kansas. Reports indicate he may take the position as the head of FSA for the state of Kansas.
Agriculture's national forecast is brought to you by Kawasaki and the new Mule Pro FXR side-by-side.
All right, that's it for the news. And now let's pitch it back to the studios with meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, I know we mentioned La Nina last week, but this week you have your 90-day forecast. So how big of an impact is La Nina having at this point?
Thanks, Tyne. Only minor impacts right now. Typically, La Nina and El Nino for that matter, kind of come on as we head through the winter, and it has a bigger impact through the winter months. So we'll be watching that, no doubt about it. Kind of a ridge trying to form through the southern portions of the country. That's going to keep you warm in the southeast and the southern plains this week. But as we take a look at the jet stream, you can see ripples moving through the northern tier of states. Each one of those will bring a shot of colder air, then it warms up behind it. So kind of a lot of ups and downs as we head through the northern tier of states, as you can see, right on through this coming weekend. November temperatures above normal along the east coast through the south. Below normal, northern plains into the northwest. Now, December looks cold for the middle of the country and even down into parts of the southeast, although I'll go above normal for Florida and also the southwest. Then it backs off a little bit. Cold from North Dakota northward, above normal though for the southeast, southern plains, southwest, and then the 90-day outlook for precipitation. The plains in the southwest look dry, above normal, eastern lakes into the northeast and for the northwest. Tyne?
Thanks, Mike. Well, immigration is an emotional topic in agriculture, especially as growers of labor-intensive crops search for an answer to the plea for help. As guest worker legislation floats around Washington, growers on the West Coast are searching for long-term solutions instead of a short-term fix. Here's Betsy Gibbon.
So we call this a 10 ring because it's the size.
As Al Stelly examines another lemon.
The fruit will not pass. It's bigger than the 10 ring, so this would be the perfect size to pick.
Conditions are right to harvest in Escondido, California. The challenge is to find labor, especially for this crop.
Because it's more specialized.
Now lawmakers hope they have a solution. The Ag Guest Worker Act, introduced by Chairman Bob Goodlatte, cleared the House Judiciary Committee in late October. It's designed to replace the H-2A program. Do you think the H-2A program is broken?
Has been since it was enacted.
If passed, H-2C will allow ag employers who need year-round workers to apply. Some of the ag industry says it's not perfect, but a start.
It's a struggle to have confidence that this is going to get done, but we are hopeful, and this is the best opportunity that I've seen in a long time.
It seems to be getting mixed reviews. Lawmakers like Republican Steve King and Louis Gohmert voted against the bill. Some farm groups say the bill has its flaws too.
So they can travel freely and not have to become a guest worker. The administration wants just guest workers. That doesn't really work for us.
Because there's no pathway to legal status. Under the bill, the producer does not need to provide free housing or transportation.
I'm not opposed to those things, but here in California, providing housing is just enormously difficult. I mean, the rules are almost impossible to comply with.
You still have to find a place to live. Where are they going to live? That's the thing nobody takes into consideration.
The bill has an escalation clause, which means under certain conditions, the number of visas go up. Currently, the bill has a visa cap set at roughly 450,000 workers. Some ag groups say that number is too low.
So that is concerning, seeing that California could utilize all that, and that's for the whole country. So that is one of the real concerning problems.
The Ag Guest Worker Act is not the only piece of legislation floating around Congress. Representative Lamar Smith introduced legislation called Legal Workforce Act, which could mandate employers to use the E-Verify system to check the legal status of ag employees. It cleared the House Judiciary Committee and could go to the House floor. Meanwhile, the Judiciary Committee added an amendment to the Ag Guest Worker Act, which would delay the new H-2C visas until the E-Verify bill goes through.
If you enact E-Verify before you enact legislation which gives us an adequate, stable legal workforce, you lose all of those people to E-Verify, and you're out of business. But give us a legal tool to hire these workers so that when we go through E-Verify, we don't have to discharge people.
As Stelly's harvest arrives.
So they can't start at dawn like we would with avocados. They have to pick the lemons in the heat of the day.
Produce needs to be picked. He hopes legislation will help, not hinder, the process. Reporting for U.S. Farm Report, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. Well, the ag worker bill did clear the committee, but it wasn't smooth sailing, with key Democrats even calling it a slave labor bill. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer says the chances of the bill actually making it all the way to the president's desk is slim to none. All right, up next, Sean Phipps.
how to make money with a small operation.
Farm Journal On Air is the go-to app for American agriculture. Ag Day, Agri-Talk, U.S. Farm Report, and more. 24/7 access to all of your favorite shows, TV and radio. Download the app today.
Your call is very important to us. Please hold.
In today's agriculture landscape, it seems like consolidation is consuming parts of agriculture, but some smaller operations are still thriving. Here's John Phipps.
We got this note from Clayton Garwood in Walker, Missouri. Do you have any advice for people who work a full-time job and try to farm a small acreage on how to be profitable or make some money? Clayton, I'll try, but keep in mind that free advice is usually worth every cent you pay for it. Small farms rarely make money doing what large farms do, that is, produce commodities. High-value crops like vegetables or even something like organic beef are needed to generate premium prices to offset low volume. However, I checked the map to see where you lived, and the problem is Walker is not close to any major urban areas. That means selling more directly to consumers or retailers at higher prices is unlikely. Right now, it is hard for farms of any size to generate profit, so the bigger threat to your future could be not losing money farming. I respect your ambition, but make sure you avoid these mistakes. First, don't value your time at zero. If your farm operation cannot generate even a small payback, no matter how hard you work, set a time limit for that situation to change and then honor it. Keep detailed financial records so you know precisely how the farm is doing, separate from your other income. Don't quit your day job if you get your health insurance that way. If you can reach break even, where the farm doesn't drain money from the family, be patient. You could have a 30-year farming career even if it begins at age 45. Take care of your health. For the later payoffs to arrive, you have to be around and functioning. Don't think you can market your way to profit. It's really, really hard to beat the average. Don't allow your dream of farming to crowd out the hopes of the rest of your family. Okay, there are small farms that are very successful, but many are small operations with inherited debt-free land and usable machinery from the previous generation as well. Machinery debt is rarely advisable for small farms. Some small farmers swap labor for machinery work with larger nearby operations. Otherwise, the possibilities are frankly limited right now, despite how passionate you may be about farming. I don't mean to be negative, but I have seen happy talk from outsiders mislead too many small operators during my career.
Thanks, John. And if you have questions or comments, email John. You can do that at mailbag@usfarmreport.com. When we come back, we travel the countryside with Andrew McCray.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
Well, it's been a wild ride for college football this season. Little talk about Notre Dame to start off, but the latest AP poll placing the Fighting Irish in the top 5. Some calling it a story of grit this year, with fans hoping it ends with a national championship victory. But it's their player from the 1920s whose name lives on, known as one of NCAA's football's finest. Here's Andrew McCray.
Here in the northwestern reaches of Michigan's Upper Peninsula is a beautiful shady cemetery. The graves for the Gipp family from the town of Calumet look much like the others surrounding them, but there's one marker that has a very large story behind it. It's the final resting place for hometown athlete George Gipp, born in 1895.
He was pretty much truant a lot of the time. Not a troublemaker in school, but just wasn't there very often. But he showed up when the games were being played, and he only played basketball. He didn't play football.
But local historian Bob Erkele explains that George also played pickup baseball games, and that sport led him to South Bend, Indiana. Wilbur Gray, who was also from Calumet, recruited Gipp to play baseball at Notre Dame, despite the fact he was Protestant and did not have a high school diploma. That's where a chance encounter with the Irish gridiron coach changed football history.
And then, of course, the story, a lot of people have heard it, with Newt Rockne seen him one day kick a football in an adjacent field to the baseball diamond, and holy cow, he says, "Where are you from?"
Rockne got Gipp to play football, and his fame soon eclipsed any accomplishments in baseball. Gipp's career rushing total of 2,341 yards stood as a Notre Dame record for over 50 years. The season rushing average of 8.1 yards per carry on over 100 rushes back in 1918 is still a record. But Gipp contracted strep throat during his senior season, and at a time without modern drugs like penicillin, his outlook was grim. It was a scene made famous by Ronald Reagan in the 1940 movie Newt Rockne, All-American.
Someday when the team's up against it, breaks are beating the boys, ask them to go in there with all they've got. Win just one for the Gipper.
George Gipp died at the age of 25 on December 14, 1920. 8 years after Gipp's death, Notre Dame was losing to an undefeated Army team. Rockne's halftime speech recalled Gipp's dying words.
Yeah, and the speech was definitely made in the locker room at halftime of that Army-Notre Dame game. But it was by Newt Rockne. Now, whether that was his version of what Gipp told him or not, I guess we never really will know for sure.
The speech is credited with rallying Notre Dame's players, helping them come back to defeat Army 12-6. The winning score was dubbed the "That's one for the Gipper" touchdown. But the line became bigger than football, becoming associated with President Reagan, who used it in 1988 to rally support for his vice president, who was vying for the Oval Office.
But George, just one personal request. Go out there and win one for the Gipper.
The movie in 1940 and Reagan's use of the line during his presidency solidified the career of a football player who otherwise might have been forgotten.
I think they were good for each other. You know, Ronald Reagan, his career was helped a lot by playing George Gipp, and George Gipp, 20 years after his death, also now became well known. And
even though it's been about a century since George Gipp was on the field at Notre Dame, his athletic abilities and his role in movies still make the Gipper a well-known name in America. Traveling the countryside in Calumet, Michigan, I'm Andrew McCray.
Win one for the Gipper. Thanks, Andrew. You can hear more of Andrew's travels online at AmericanCountryside.com. But when we come back, Machinery Pete has a classic Farmall 350. Don't go anywhere.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by QLF. For 40 years, QLF has been proud to support American farmers that feed the world. Tractor Tales is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
Welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week we're going to go to Indiana and check out a classic Farmall 350. This propane fuel tractor is a workhorse today, just like it was over 40 years ago when owner Marvin Berkshire traded for it. He says he loves to get it dirty and work hard. We met up with Marvin at a local field day in central Indiana.
I got a 350 LP. It's all original. I've used 20% this morning plowing this hard ground. That's part of what's wrong with today is this ground's been packed so hard you can't get the plows to go in the ground and dry. Traded for it back in the 60s. It's more important, it's just increasing horsepower. Yeah, I've used it for 40 years. Cultivating and hauling hay and mowing hay. I just painted it several years ago. It's a propane tractor. It's factory equipped, just like a gasoline tractor. Starts on propane, runs on propane. Oh, it'll run 8 hours. We plow about 40, 50 acres on my farm every fall. See, I'm running on $1.10 fuel right now. These guys are running $2.49 or $2.75 diesel fuel. No, I'm just gonna keep it. They've never seen too many of these LPs.
Thanks, guys. Well, this week's Country Church Salute goes to the Holy Trinity Catholic Church, located not too far from here in Weston, Missouri. The church celebrating its 105th anniversary in October of this year. Congratulations, and thanks for sending that in. Please stay with us. We have a harvest surprise next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Kubota's M5 series, bringing new levels of comfort to hard work.
Welcome back to Kansas City. Well, as harvest chugs along, some farmers are busy planting wheat. Alan is in Bartlett, Texas. He tweeted out this photo saying, quote, "Yeah, I'm planting wheat. No, I don't know why." That's as wheat prices are really struggling right now. And here's something you don't find every day. Clark in Ontario was harvesting and found a plane. He says the crash landing did have a good ending. The pilot was safe and very little damage was done to the plane. And April was trying to get corn harvested in Iowa this week, but Mother Nature was trying to put a damper on her plans. Snow was falling as she was harvesting. The latest USDA numbers show Iowa is 26 points behind in corn harvest. And someone not seeing snow, our November Facebook cover photo winner. Austin Miles snapped this picture of his cattle at sunrise. He farms in Texas, but this is of his pasture that's actually in southern Oklahoma. Well, if you have a picture or a video that you would like to share, you can do that to the address on the screen. Well, thanks for joining us in Kansas City for this special edition of U.S. Farm Report from this beautiful fall day. Join us next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report has been brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest-lasting heavy-duty pickup. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.